Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is just eat meat, and that's what you should do. But if you're hiking or road tripping or stuck at work and you want something nutritious that is just meat, fat, and possibly salt, if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. I like this product not only because it is pure meat, but also because I really want the carnivore market to thrive as well. The more we support meat only products, the more people will make meat only products, and this will bring this into the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to check out, then take a look and use my discount code HTC to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, we're here with another episode of the How to Carnivore podcast. We've got Dr. Anthony Chaffe, the plant-free MD, and we're joined by Jess Randle, who's based out of Japan. And I've been following her on Instagram for a while, and she's pumping out some fantastic carnivore content. So we thought we'd get her on and have a chat and find out how Jess got into the world of carnivore. So Jess, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Our pleasure. How about we kick off with how did you get into carnivore?
So I heard about carnivore because my husband showed me the Joe Rogan and Shawn Baker podcast. And
I feel like 9 out of 10 people say that's how they got into it, probably myself included.
Which is amazing, which is actually a testament to sharing these things on social media, because you never know whose life you're going to change, because that podcast did drastically change my life, like 180. So I am so thankful that my husband happened to be following Joe Rogan and Shawn Baker happened to be a guest. And then he showed me because I was
happen to be married to him.
I know, I happen to be married to him, which is another interesting story too of how we got married. But yeah, it just coincident is serendipitous. It was serendipitous. But yeah, so I was always struggling with weight loss. My whole life, I just could never lose. I had about 20 extra pounds on me that I could never lose, no matter how active I was, how many times I worked out. And I also had really bad anger issues and mood swings and anxiety. I was a crazy person, and I feel really bad for my husband having to deal with me before I went carnivore and now, but especially before. But yeah, so I was dumb and I didn't realize that I could look into what was happening to me and find answers. I just thought, this is how my life is going to be. This is just the cards I was dealt. I'm just going to be fat and have acne and just be depressed for the rest of my life. And my husband started looking into things online, and I didn't know about it. And he came across the Joe Rogan, Shawn Baker podcast and showed it to me and just said, hey, you should watch this. It kind of sounds like some of the things you're dealing with, so maybe it can help you. And I watched it, and just it made sense. What he was saying made sense. It resonated with me. I gave it a try for World Carnivore Month, January 2020, and never really looked back after that.
Nice. Cool. So what are some of the things that you saw, like in your changes, like that? I mean, what were you eating before, and then what differences did you notice? Jesus, can't speak today.
Thanks, Joe.
I mean, you don't have any excuse either. You just work on brains all day. What's your excuse? I'm just joking. But so what changes? Before I went carnivore, I was gluten-free for 10 years before that. So I was eating healthy. I was eating a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruit, oatmeal, eggs, turkey bacon, white meat chicken, some fish. I would have a lot of Chipotle, like rice bowl type meals, and protein shakes. So basically just healthy American with some gluten-free grains in there. And I was okay. Like, so before I went gluten-free, I actually had really bad gut issues to where I was so constipated my whole entire life that I would only go to the bathroom once every 3 to 4 weeks for almost 19 years of my life. It was so bad. And then when I was 19,
after that, like, I mean, the amount of stuff that like packed in there. Like, God.
yeah. Oh yeah. No, I don't have a child, but I feel like I know what it's like to give birth to a child.
No.
It was horrible. It was tragic. I would cry. It was just like, and it was awful. It's not, I don't wish that on anyone. So then when I was around 18, 19, the whole gluten-free craze started coming in and becoming popular. And so I went gluten-free at 19, and it helped a lot, but I still would suffer with gut issues. I still had really bad acne. I still had weight that I just could not lose. And when my stomach was just constantly bloated. And then when I did go carnivore, my skin cleared up, my mood issues balanced out. I no longer just would have random bursts of anger for no reason. I lost 20 pounds. I feel amazing. It's what hasn't it helped with is the better question.
I think the gluten-free first, and then you discover that there's other things in food, is a pretty common sort of trail as well. Because I did the exact same thing. And I'm on this like gluten-free Facebook group in Australia, and it's got like 100,000 people in it. And Jeez. Someone Anthony, you would have found it so funny. Someone posted their meal yesterday, and I kid you not, it was like they took a photo. They're like, I can't believe how good this meal was. Gluten-free garlic bread, gluten-free pasta with like a tomato sauce, and a gluten-free beer. And I was just like, wow. So it's like totally nutrient devoid, and it's just a whole heap of processed crap that are that's causing issues anyway. Sure, it doesn't have the gluten, but that's going to upset your gut and bloat you big time anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone we get very, very focused on one thing, right? So for years, it was, decades, still is fat and cholesterol. Like that's the only thing. It doesn't matter as long as it doesn't have fat cholesterol. Like that's it. And then it was gluten. That was a big one that came out of nowhere overnight. As soon as people heard what celiac was, or I must be celiac, and it's funny. And I remember thinking it was sort of ridiculous at the time. People were saying it's like, you are not celiac, just stop it, and just everyone just I'm gluten intolerant, all that sort of stuff. JP Sears did a skit about being glucose intolerant or gluten intolerant and things like that, and how just making fun of that whole thing. It was funny, but and then carbs, that being just the one thing ever that can be the bad thing. And so you have artificial sweeteners and all that, but that's okay because it's not carbs. It's like, God, no. And, meth doesn't have carbs either, go to town. And, but, the thing was like people actually did have problems with gluten. They didn't matter if they were celiac or not. Like this stuff can cause damage and cause harm. And so, but then realizing that there's other things in there as well, and then, getting rid of just, the wheat in general and the carb containing things in general, it's not even just like going keto has so many more benefits than just eliminating carbohydrates. That's a major one. That's an absolutely major one. You switch over to your primary metabolic state. I think that's a huge benefit, but all the things that have carbs also contain a lot of things that you really don't want either. So you're actually eliminating a lot more than just the carbs. And so you get a lot of benefit there. So it's good to see people starting to see that it's not just one thing or the other. Oh, it's gluten. Oh, it's carbs. Oh, it's fat. No. Like, first of all, it's not fat. Second of all, it could be, a lot of other things as well. And so it's good to see people starting to sort of realize that there's more than one bad thing on earth.
Yeah, I kind of lucked out too, because even before I was gluten-free, I was not a huge fan of just eating bread things. So when I did realize that gluten was causing these issues, and I cut it out, I didn't substitute a bunch of gluten-free pasta, gluten-free, like the garlic bread and things like that. So I basically did cut out a lot of like bready type foods from my diet just because I was uninterested, and they weren't really good when the gluten-free craze started. They weren't very good anyway, so it was kind of pointless to eat them.
Yeah, gluten-free gluten. like it's just,
That's what it is pretty much.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. It's just like, why don't you just, eliminate, gluten comes in something. Okay. That is bad in there, but think about that in the grand scheme of things. Why does a plant have that in there in the first place to sort of defend it? Maybe there's going to be something else in there as well. Maybe just think of that as, oh, maybe that's something that I just shouldn't eat. It has gluten in it. I don't do well with gluten. I just shouldn't eat anything that naturally contains gluten. That may be something to think about as well, or a better way to think about it. Because when you're thinking about things naturally, you're out in the woods, you're out, living in a cave somewhere, you're not gonna be able to extract the gluten from a plant and, eat that. Right. So you just have to eat what's available. And that's sort of my question with people that say that we're herbivores and we're supposed to be vegan. What plants are we eating now that we had 50,000 years ago? There's none. I mean, I don't think there's a single one that hasn't been, biologically altered significantly and just bioengineered to be very different than their natural forms. And so, maybe, you could argue that people are supposed to eat plants, but you cannot argue that we're supposed to eat all the plants that we're eating now. Those things didn't exist. And no animal in the wild eats such a variety of plants that we do. So some of those are wrong. And you can go from a plant-based standard Western diet to a plant-based vegetarian whole foods diet and do better. But you get rid of meat, which I think is a mistake, but you're also changing out, worse plants for better plants. Or you could go vegetarian or vegan and get totally worse and gain a bunch of weight, eat a bunch of carbs and pizza and all that sort of stuff, and get, infinitely worse in your health. So it's well, anyway, it's an interesting discussion.
So I do have a question for you. How do you respond to people who say that, well, the cattle and the animals that we're eating today aren't the same as the animals that we ate 50,000 years ago? They're much different and they're filled with antibiotics and all of these, and soy and grain. So how do you respond to those people?
Get rid of the soy and grain. Totally with them on that. The soy and grain are filth. But buffalo are different than they were 50,000 years ago. I don't know about that. I'm pretty damn sure those things are still wild. They've only just started domesticating them very recently. And so those are the same buffalo that have been here for God knows how long. Cows, those are just, we've bred them, but they're not fundamentally different species. Right. And so, they still have the same sort of nutrient profile and complement that other forms of ruminants would have as well. You feed them the wrong thing, they're going to have that's going to make them less healthy themselves and pass that on to us. But not all that much, not compared to actually eating the wheat and soy ourselves. That would be a huge mistake. But no, what's fundamentally different about the muscle of a cow versus the muscle of an auroch, that was what we bred these things from, pretty damn similar, and we eat buffalo, kangaroo, that hasn't changed. Plenty of people eat kangaroo, goanna, all these things. And hunting deer, are those really different? I mean, no, this is silly. The point of the plants being different, actually the plants have actually probably been made safer in a lot of respects because they've been bred to be less bitter. Well, that bitter taste is more defense chemicals and your body's saying, stay the hell away from this stupid thing. And so you've bred it to be actually probably less toxic because it's less bitter. And then you've bred it to be more sweet, have more sugar in it and less fibrous. So you can actually chew the damn thing instead of like a mango, a natural mango, massive seed, just a little bit of meat. And it's very fibrous and almost no sugar in it. And like, no one's eating that, And so they've actually made it more palatable. And, sugar is not good for you, but getting rid of the other toxins and making it less bitter, that probably is. And then we've sort of gone the other way with GMOs, where we're now implanting, the DNA to make proteins that are more toxic. So we're now going back the other way. We're making it more toxic. So, bugs and insects and things like that can't eat them. So, the point of, saying like, well, what did we eat naturally 50,000 years ago, as far as a plant is concerned, is that, the plants that we use now, they're all bioengineered, they're all processed, all these sorts of things. You can't do that without technology, And so, if we had plants that we were eating for millions of years, why are we not still eating them? you know, and you can't get a complete complement of nutrients from the plants that we eat. Even all the plants that we do eat, you know, getting close to that, you know, they're plants that simply didn't exist on the same continent, and they certainly didn't exist on the continent that we evolved on, right? So where do we get all our nutrients from? You know, there's no single source plant, or even, you know, few in the same family source plant that's going to have all the nutrients. Actually, no plants on earth will have all the nutrients that we need. And the plants that we eat, they're all from like different continents. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any damn sense. And so, you know, if we were eating plants all the time and we were subsisting on these things, you know, forget all the other, you know, data that goes counter to this, we would still be eating that plant, whatever the hell it was, but we're not eating any plants that existed 50,000 years ago. And, you know, all the data like the stable isotope studies show that we weren't eating plants at all, really, 50,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago. Certainly not up in you know, the ice climbs. You know, people say, oh, well, people were down in East Africa and that didn't have ice. I'm like, who said it did? Like, that's not where everyone lived, though. And, you know, actually when the ice sheets came down, we were moving up into them. You know, that's where the big game was. And so it's sort of a silly argument. And it's brand new. Like, I mean, no one ever even claimed that people were herbivores until like last week when this whole vegan thing started coming through. I'm like, oh, actually, this is natural. Because I was like, well, it doesn't make sense. It's not natural. You know, we're carnivores and these things have this fat. No, it's totally natural. No, we evolved this way. No, it's totally the best way. I'm like, you're an idiot. You know, and or your school failed you by indoctrinating you in stupid things. But no, it's a bit insane. We've been eating meat forever, you know, and you know, we only started eating plants very recently, and they're different plants. They're very different plants.
I think also if you look at the quantity, like, you know, back thousands of years ago, it would have been so hard to get, as you were saying, with the mango example. Like, you know, you can't just go and buy a box of mangoes where it's pretty much all flesh and all sugar. Back then, you might find one mango at a particular time of year, and then you get your little bit of plant food if you want it. But then in terms of quantity of animals, like, if anything, animals have gotten smaller. You know, we used to have megafauna here in Australia where, you know, like koalas were as big as buffalo.
Were they?
Yeah. We had megafauna and like giant kangaroos, and they were hunted down by the Aborigines. So we had, you know, really big animals here, and then obviously huge, you know, buffalo and wild game in America too. So
what kind of trees were they holding on to?
Yeah, that's a good question. It must have been
like bending over. Yeah,
it would have been. I suppose it would look like a bear. Like, can you imagine, like, you know, like a grizzly bear, but it's actually a koala.
Yeah. Jesus.
Wow. Yeah. Those probably would have been. Can you eat those? They probably would have been pretty easy to hunt.
They're definitely endangered at the moment, and half of them have
mega koalas. Yeah, probably not too many anymore.
Yeah, I don't think you want to hit a koala, but you know, if they were massive like a bear, I'm sure they would have been hunted.
About all the Americans walking around Walmart.
Yeah.
Well, that was the Baker. Shawn Baker did a post where there's like this guy who's sort of sitting in this chair, all fine robes and decked out. He was just sitting there, just, you know, looking like a badass, very, you know, overweight guy. But, you know, I mean, you'd see him and be like, wow, that guy's quite overweight. But he was a spectacle. People came from all over the place to see this guy, and he was the fattest man on earth in 1890. And the caption was like, this guy wouldn't even be the third fattest guy in Walmart today, you know? And like, it's true. You look at the guy, and you're like, yeah, I mean, that's sort of par for the course, really, you know? He's fat, but he's like a normal fat guy, you know? He's not just like, oh my goodness, sort of overweight. He's just like, yeah, that guy's fat, you know? Like, and we've just sort of lost. I think that this period in history will hopefully, God, you know, willing, like, get out of this sort of craziness mentally, and people actually start eating normally and start eating better, and this all gets out there, and people start getting healthy again and naturally slender and develop properly. That we'll look back on this time and, you know, have, like, you know, all the pictures on the beach in the 70s where everyone's like skinny and normal and fit and healthy, And then, now where it's very different to that. And they're just going to look at this video. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, they were really crazy. They thought this really weird thing that, plants were the way to go and that meat was actually unhealthy for you and eat a bunch of carbs and nonsense. And wow, they got really, really overweight and unhealthy. And this period of very serious ill health, where you're looking back at like, Ukraine in the late 20s and 30s, where they're having like mass famines and 6 million people died. You're like, wow, that was terrible. I think that you would have to sort of recognize this if we ever get out of this madness, that you'll have to look back at this is a period of craziness where people really suffered without really even realizing it.
Yeah. Do you think that we will ever get out of it though? Because it blows my mind, like watching people in retrospect. I think that it makes sense now, but back then I thought the same way of, I can have this treat if I go work it off, go to the gym and work it off. So now when I see people who are obese and overweight and clearly need to lose weight, and they're shoving ice cream and like carbs and stuff in their mouth, I always think to myself, like, do they think that their obesity is genetic and they just have no idea what they're doing to themselves? Because that's what society tells you, is that it's just a genetic issue. You can have that slice of pizza as long as you walk 10,000 steps in a day or something like that. And it just, now looking back, it doesn't make any sense, but so many people still believe that lie. Do you think we'll ever get out of that?
I think so. I'm quite hopeful that we will. I think more and more people are waking up to that fact. The whole calories in, calories out. People are just getting less and less credible. Because it's ridiculous. There are plenty of studies that show that doesn't actually work for everybody. You actually you're having calorie control. I mean, first of all, you're never ever going to be able to track how many calories you're actually using in a day. You will never be able to figure that out without very, very expensive lab equipment. You just won't. And then, and so, you have to do these things under experiment. And so when they have these calorie controlled trials, it doesn't actually work for everybody. And you change the amount of, depending on what you eat, you actually depress your metabolism or increase your metabolism, depending on how much you eat and what you eat. And so if you're not eating carbohydrates, you will on average raise your basal metabolic rate by 300 kilocalories a day. You will burn 300 more kilocalories every day, just by not eating carbohydrates. Okay. So that makes a big difference. And so, and obviously these things are complex, biochemical, agents. And I mean, they have different chemical properties. They're going to have different reactions in your body. Our bodies are just this crazy complex, chemistry experiment. We have trillions and trillions and trillions of interactions, chemical interactions happening every split second, and you will never be able to micromanage that. You just won't, you just need to let your body do its thing, and you have to do what your body's designed to do. And then you have to figure out what that is. And obviously people are crazy there, but more people are coming around to this, simple fact. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I was doing this, no one heard of this. There's just no one, there was Baker talking about it. Saladino came on the scene after that. That was it. There was no one else talking about it whatsoever. And when I moved to Perth 3 years ago, no one, I mean, people thought I was absolutely out of my mind. I ended up having like conversations like 3 a day, because people would be like, you do what? Like, and like, it'd be on from there. And so like, I just from word of mouth just started, telling more and more people about it. And, more and more people started catching up. And now, I have a podcast, and that's, gotten out there. Now people around here are sort of, becoming more and more popular, not necessarily because of my podcast, but just in general. And I talk to people and I say like, oh, what do you're just eating a lot of protein. I was like, well, I just, this is what I do. And they were like, oh yeah, you do carnivore diet. Oh, my brother does a carnivore diet. He really likes it. He is really good. Now they know it by name, and they're calling it and they're referring to it. And, I've had patients where I've seen them in the emergency department, and they were like, do you like only eat meat? And I'm like, yeah. Like, how'd you know that? And they're like, well, actually I follow you on Instagram and your podcast. Like, really like your stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. One guy, he had just had surgery. Like, I hadn't even been in the hospital. So he didn't know me. I hadn't met him personally, but I went into the hospital. I had been at other hospitals, and I came back to this one. It was my first day back. And I was doing a round and I didn't know anybody. And I went up and I was like, oh, hello, Mr. So-and-so. And he was just like, hi, Dr. Chaffe. I'm like, what? And then he just started talking to me about like diet stuff. I'm like, it like became clear like this guy knew me from the podcast, and he started like really trying to pick my brain about all these things. I'm like, okay, well, I'm on rounds. we can come back to this. And so it's interesting, and more and more people are knowing about it. More people are like recognizing, people like, oh yeah, I know that guy, follow that guy. Crazy. So it's becoming more popular, and it's starting to get to approaching critical mass, because now people like Lane Norton and Gregor and all these sorts of people, they have to talk and detract from a carnivore diet. So it's become popular enough that now the mainstream people have to recognize and address it and say why they think it's wrong and why they don't support it. And then people like Dr. Barry, who are much more intelligent and thorough as scientists, they've actually looked at this and go like, oh, actually, there's something to this. And instead of just, being, very, petrified in their beliefs, people are actually sort of changing. So people are doing that too. So I think it's sort of getting to that point where it's going to become very, at least known mainstream quite soon. So I think the truth will out. I mean, this just simply works, and the Harvard study that at least put it on the map as far as something that you can actually test and quantify. It was a good proof of concept. You had 2,000 people, every single one improved dramatically over many, many different metrics. And so that's hard to ignore. As far as someone that's going to develop a study in nutrition, you have to include this stuff now. And so more and more and more will come out. And I just think it will eventually be very, very clear what is readily apparent to all of us doing this, is that this is the way we're supposed to eat. And this is, what's healthy.
That's awesome. I agree.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I wonder, do you think that we need to focus more on the benefits of carnivore and why it's right, or focus more on why Ansel Keys or specific people were wrong? Like, what do you think will change more minds onto carnivore?
I think you need both, because like, the whole thing is like, oh, well, you can talk about, I think you start with, well, we, biologically we're carnivores, and this is the best way for us to eat. This is how we're designed. And people say, well, okay, because that's actually not a new concept. That's something that, I was taught as a child in school, was that humans are apex predators, we're hunter gatherers, all that stuff. We're not gatherers, we were hunters. And so, because again, like no cave paintings of a salad. So I haven't even seen cave paintings of people picking berries. It's hunting. Like that's what it is, And so that is something that people already recognize, that historically people were eating meat, except, the idiots out there that, all these people just pushing like, no, we've been vegan forever. Like in the face of why are we painting pictures of hunting animals if we did not hunt animals? I mean, that is an absurd, argument to make. So apart from those people who don't know how to think, most people understand that humans have been primarily hunters for a very long time. And, and so you can sort of get your head around that. Well, yeah, we've been eating meat for a very long time. This is what we're adapted to do. This is what we're designed to do biologically. And they go, yeah, but doesn't meat cause cancer? Doesn't meat, that's the second question every time. That's the next one. Doesn't it cause heart disease? Doesn't cause this, doesn't cause that. Like, well, actually, no. And then you go into the fraud side of things. So it is part of the whole argument. And so, but I think you start with, this is the biologically appropriate diet for humans. And then you can start, picking apart why the detractors of that diet had it wrong. Even that University of Washington study that just went through all the different, data and studies looking at, basically vilifying meat unfairly. So these were lazy studies, and they didn't really show anything, and they were all flawed in a number of ways, but people are just running to the bank with these things, and forgetting, or just ignoring, not wanting to know that these things were flawed. And not only flawed, but most of them were fraudulent. They had a lot of biases. The Loma Linda medical groups. I mean, they have like 81 different hospitals across the U.S. The Seventh-day Adventists, they have their little finger, grubby little fingers and everything. And so they put out a lot of studies that are just fraud, to push their religious agenda, which is wrong. I mean, which is weird. It's not even the basis of actual religion. It's just that sect decided that, meat made you lustful, made you want to procreate. Oh my goodness, no. The perpetuation of the human species, God, that's right against God's law. That made you lustful, and lust was a sin, therefore meat was bad. That was their whole rationale. That's like the logic of a third grader, and so and they never developed it after that. They never thought about it after that, going, oh, actually this is what it's doing. It's actually making you healthier. It's actually making your hormones work better in balance, and your body's saying, hey, you're ready to procreate, you're healthy enough to procreate, which is your biological purpose. And in most religions, they promote that. They say, hey, go forth and multiply. Yeah. But then they're saying, no, actually that's a bad thing. They're the only ones, but they're putting out a lot of misinformation out there, and it's fraudulent. It's fraud. They're doing bad science. They're putting out bad studies to push an agenda. And, people are starting to understand that. And then mainstream peer-reviewed studies and publications are coming out in major journals that like the UW study, they're just like, yeah, no, this is crap, so yeah, I think it'll continue to get better.
Sweet.
Yeah. Hopefully. So tell us about the work that you do in the carnivore space. Like what platforms do you have now, and what sort of stuff are you putting out?
I mainly am on Instagram and just do fun little reels and try to trigger as many vegans as I can.
Yeah.
That's my goal. And one of my big goals too, and I do have a YouTube with my friend Serena, and we make carnivore recipes and do interviews and things like that. And it's called Carnivore Revolution. So those are my two main ones, is YouTube and Instagram. But another one of my goals for social media too is to de-Disney-fy society and make people desensitize people to animal death, because I feel like even in the carnivore community, there's way too many people who can't watch an animal being eaten by another animal without getting queasy. And I think that is kind of, if you're going to be a meat eater, I think you kind of need to be able to know that in nature, animals are eaten alive, and that's how it goes. So that's one of my goals too, is just to be, I'm not a very subtle person. I'm not a quiet person. So I like to make a big splash and try to wake people up. And that is something that I do too, is just, I post really graphic videos to try to desensitize people.
Fair enough. Well, do you follow what is it? Nature is Metal on Instagram?
Yes. Yeah,
they're awesome. You get like a daily clip of like some lion hunting down a wildebeest or something. It's like, yeah, that's what happens. That's nature. They're both fighting for their life, literally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry.
No,
I know. I posted a reel where there was two leopards. I think they were leopards eating a baby fawn or something like that. And it was like screaming, and it was like biting its neck and stuff. And I was just eating chicken wings next to it on the reel. And I was like, which one's more cruel? And obviously neither one is cruel, but you're told, like, people obviously know in nature, when an animal is eating another animal, that it's not a cruel act. That's just how it happens. But for some reason, when humans eat animals, we're cruel, even though we need those nutrients literally to survive. So, because we are like animals too. Like we're smart. Yes, we have free will. Yes, we have a conscience, but that doesn't mean that we can survive on plants. Like we don't live in a like Disney movie. Like we live in reality. So I think that even though we are more intelligent, we're also incredibly stupid, and it's quite tragic.
Even like Disney movies back in the day were pretty hardcore. They had pretty adult thing. Like Pinocchio, that was dark. And you sort of know like the story behind it. But like But that's the thing, I do talk to people and they're just like, oh my God, this cruel and this, that, and the other. And it's horrible to kill an animal, just to live. And I just point out, I was like, okay, so do we just go around, we just kill all the predators in the world, just all the birds, all the lions, all the dolphins, all the fish. We just get rid of all these things, just wipe them out. Because that's just too evil to like have an animal live on another animal. And they're like, well, no. I mean, that's just nature. I mean, they're just doing their nature. It's like, yeah, we're in nature too. Like that's part of it. Just because we live in houses doesn't mean that we, get to step outside of the natural laws of the world. Sorry, you just, no, it's not going to happen. And we're not an invasive species that just came down here from space and is just completely outside of this, and we can just pick and choose how we survive. No, we are involved in this whole thing as well. And you sort of forget that at your own detriment, and you end up damaging yourself and the environment. Because we're now doing a lot of things that actually damage the environment in order 100%. To make these sort of plant foods and all these sorts of things which destroy more than they rebuild. And and that's because we're getting outside of nature. So you have to destroy nature in order to get away from nature. And that's what these people are missing as well. And I mean, who did not grow up watching National Geographic videos? Like that was like my favorite thing, was like National Geographic documentaries on like the lions of the Serengeti and like fighting the hyenas and like taking down elephants and bison. I'm like, this is awesome. Like that's all I wanted to see. And now I watched a National Geographic thing the other day. Absolute just nonsense. They'll have a hunt. They're going, I'm like, yes, here it is. Here's the good part. And they go down and they're like chasing, and they go like jump up on the back of this giraffe, cuts over to them eating it. Like, what the hell? Like they just cut that out. It's just, oh God, it's going to be triggered. Like, oh goodness.
Jeez.
It's just like, you are supposed to be showing what's happening in nature. You are supposed to be teaching people how the world works. And you are purposefully censoring this stuff, and that's doing them a disservice, because this is reality, and, and also like the people should be watching that. People watching that they know what's going on. Like, just like, I was like that stuff, like we had a National Geographic subscription, like the magazines and things like that. There was all sorts of wild stuff in there, and but yeah, you're right. We're very removed. People talk about, you see those vegan videos with people saying like, go to this restaurant, like, oh yeah, it's so great, it's so good. And you go in the back and you just like murder this pig yourself. It's amazing. Like, first of all, you're not getting one meal out of a pig, right? So like you'll eat for 3 months, a big pig, even more. And, and they're like, oh God, this poor thing. I was like, just do it. Just smash in the head with a sledgehammer. Just, It's like, none of that's real. And, all of you are stupid, and they talk about, they think about this because they're so sort of sheltered into this way of thinking that no one has ever hunted in their life, or no one has ever raised their own animals. They're like, oh my God, wouldn't you just go out? Like, if you had to kill your own animal, like no one would do it. Like no one would do it. Like if you had to like kill an animal in the wild, survive, like just no one would be able to do it. Like people do it every damn day, and they have historically before.
What's been happening for 50,000 years? How do you think this all got started?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like we've only had grocery stores and like the technology to move cattle and food and fruit across the world for like 50 years. It's not really possible before that. These things would spoil in a shipping container, unless you had refrigeration units, all these sorts of things. That technology didn't exist. You had to eat what was around you. Most people grew their own food, raised their own animals, and then milked them and sheared them and ate them. Like that's what everyone did. So actually, if you had to, everyone would do it. Including you.
That's one of the biggest insults I think that I get on social media is when people go, you wouldn't kill a chicken to eat it. I'm like, excuse me, just because you think like, just because I'm kind of cute, like you think I can't kill an animal? Like, are you kidding me?
I did it yesterday. Where do you think I got this?
I know. I was like, are you kidding? Like my husband had to go through this school for the military where they either had to kill a rabbit or a chicken, I believe it was, and they had to either hit the rabbit over the head or like deadlift the chicken and decapitate it. And there was this part where the wives were invited to go through a part of the school, and they went through the killing the animal part, and he didn't tell me about it, and I was so bummed because I wanted to go and be able to
Yep.
like, it was like
Rip a chicken's head off.
yeah, like
Deadlift a chicken's head.
yeah, like I want to learn, like hunt and learn how to field dress and get my own food. And I don't want to just have to go to the grocery store and depend on that. That's not the kind of life I want to live or the kind of meat eater I want to be. Like, I want to be involved in nature and be a real like hunter, you know. And even though I am female, like I don't think that matters much, but like I have a desire to do that more than just be given my food in a plastic wrapped container, you know. I think that's a cool thing too. I can't wait to get back to the United States so I can actually start hunting and doing these things more, because I feel so trapped here because you can't, there's no guns here. I don't think you can hunt really. We go spearfishing, and I'm not really good at it. I've never actually speared a fish. But
You mean you go swimming with a gun?
Yeah.
I go snorkeling with a spear in my hand, and I look really cool, and I shoot at things, but I've gotten a scale one time, but I've never actually gotten a fish because it's a lot harder than it looks. But I want to do those things, and I want to encourage other people to do those things and like be out there. And I think it'd be so cool. Do you guys know of any places you can go in the United States to actually go to, like a butcher or a place where they kill the cows and prepare them and everything? Like, I think it'd be so cool to go there and watch from beginning to end how the process works and learn about it, because it seems dumb to me that we're scared to do that, or we're scared to watch it, and we can only have this like burger on our plate and then we're okay with it. Like, I want to watch the whole process, you know?
Yeah, there are. I mean, you can go to like rural butchers and things like that, and because you can order a cow through a butcher, and they're like, okay, they'll get the cow and they'll process it and things like that. And yeah, I guess you could ask to just to sort of watch that and watch it happen. And then like if you have like ranchers or someone who has a farm, they'll just come out. They want to take one cow out. There are butchers that will actually go to your property and they have like sort of a mobile sort of butcher shop, and they'll sort of take it in the back of this thing and kill it there, and then sort of process the whole thing in the back of this trailer that's all set up for that. Then there's places that you can just go to farms really, and a lot of them will process their meat there themselves, or have a butcher come out. And I was buying a sheep here, and I was talking to someone about that, and there was a doctor who's a rural GP from South Africa, but he lives out here, and he has like a bunch of sheep and things like that. So I was going to buy one off of him, and he was saying, he's like, yeah, if you want to come down, you can be involved in it, you can help slaughter it and process it and things like that. I'm like, absolutely. I mean, I think the same thing. Like, I think if you're going to do this, you need to be involved in the process, and you need to know what that means. People used to know where their food came from, and I remember hearing that as a kid. People don't know where their food came from anymore. And it always felt like a weird thing to me. It's like, well, it came from the store. It's right there. And no, but I knew it came from animals, and I knew that they were raised for that. But it's very different, intellectually, like understand, oh yeah, that comes from animals or whatever, and actually being involved in the process. And you're like, okay, well, this is real. And you have a much deeper appreciation for the sacrifice of that animal. And that's why hunters, people that don't get it, they think of hunters as just these like butchers and just would-be murderers. They'd be going around killing people if they could get away with it, but they just kill deer instead. I'm sure there have been examples of that in the past, but like that by no means is that almost anyone to any significant degree, or statistically zero really. But there's like a very big, you talk to hunters, you talk to people, like they really appreciate that animal. They really appreciate the sacrifice. They feel it every time they kill an animal. And I mean, so many people are just like, wow, I really appreciate this animal, like taking this animal's life is going to feed my family for the rest of the year, really appreciate this and blah, blah, blah. And so, they actually appreciate animals' lives and their sacrifice a lot more, and they're usually much more involved in wildlife conservation as well. It's very superficial just to say, well, I don't eat meat, therefore I'm doing something good. It's like, well, you don't actually know what that's doing. You don't know what the downstream effects of that decision are. And in most cases, they're actually detrimental to the exact things that you're trying to help,
Because in life, it's a pretty consistent theme that you need tragedy to have some sort of good thing happen. And I feel like too many people in society today think that we can go through life and just have sunshine and rainbows all the time if everyone just gets along and hugs each other and things like that. And that's not how life works. That's not how any aspect of life works, even to like building muscle. Like you have to break it down and you have to have pain in order to get better. So every single part of life, when people try to make it better and they disregard the bad aspects of it, it's only going to make things worse 100% of the time. Like you have to have the bad to have the good, which is the whole, like, every single culture, every single religion has the balance of good and evil. As far as I know, I don't want to say every, but as far as I know, they
all the good ones, all the good ones.
they have the balance of good and evil because they understand. And I think that we're getting so disconnected from reality of thinking that we can just have good and that people can just be good, and that's not possible.
Yeah,
or that people are good.
Yeah, exactly.
Like life is one big network of incentives, and our incentives are get nutrition and protect ourselves and our family, right? And everybody's working in that same way. And yeah, we can work together and be good to each other, but we're all going for really a selfish outcome. And that's because we are part of nature. And the lion is going for a selfish outcome. It's trying to get a feed. So is every other animal. We're part of it. You can't just remove us from it, lock them up, and then have this monocrop thing on the side that's actually destroying, this nature you're trying to protect at the same time. And none of it makes sense.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, when you sort of work within a natural system, that system of incentives actually ends up working out, because you're trying to do things that are right for you. And that actually ends up helping people around you and working in cooperation. That helps, a lot of people around you. Even just being free to interact in the way that you want, that benefits people. If you want, greed does not give people a bigger paycheck. It's like all these greedy billionaires. It's like, well, they could be greedy. They might be greedy, but that's not what they made them billionaires or millionaires. Because like that however greedy you are, like I want $1 billion an hour. Like, oh, okay, I'll give you that then. Like that's not how that works. Like
No.
you can be greedy and want a lot, but that doesn't mean anyone's going to pay you that. So you have to be able to find something that people want to pay you for. So what do you have to do? You have to provide benefit to other people's lives, in exchange, for money. You're going to benefit their lives somehow. And if you don't benefit their life, you don't get anything from them. So you have to find benefit in other people's lives that they value more than the money that they are giving you. Right. Like Bill Gates is as crazy as he's become. He did not become rich by like robbing people and screwing, like just being greedy. He provided products that revolutionized the home computer world, and it really, really, really helped society in general. And so that's something that you have to do. And so just these you can be selfish, but you still have to provide something for other people. That's and then when you start messing with that, then you get people that are just greedy, and because they have government control over things, they can just do whatever they want. But then that actually screws things up. But I think that when you sort of let things happen on their own, and your own natural incentives are able to play out, that actually helps people at large as well, and the world at large, because it's in no one's best interest to have a bunch of polluted water. And if you have water on your land, and that's your water on your land, you are going to benefit by keeping that clean. And so if you have a neighbor upstream that's sort of throwing a bunch of crap in it, like you have something personal, hey, cut that out. And then you have, something to take up with them. So that actually ends up having this big knock-on effect of actually helping quite a lot of the world and society, and it's just more than society, but just, the world in large.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good argument too for having small communities instead of like one large system, because it's easier to communicate and have like people of like-minded in the same thing, because if it gets too big, then you have people who are greedy and want too much control, and then things go out of hand. And I think that's another thing that's really cool about the carnivore community too, is like we really are community mindset and encourage people to buy local and get to know each other and get back to our traditional roots and get out of this like hive mind, like connected to everything in the world mentality, and just go back to nature and simpler times and small communities and growing food if you want something grown, and think in farming and stuff like that. So I agree.
But you're right though. I mean, like you look in the United States, when we started out in the early United States, that was the whole point, was that you have your own community. That's like the most powerful unit. You guys can just do whatever you want. You can choose what happens in your community. Your home was the main thing. Your home, each man is king of his own castle. Like that's your land, that's your property. You get to do what the hell you want, as long as you aren't violating other people's rights. And then you have your own little community. You make your own little rules that work in that community. You guys also think, I think this is the best thing for us. Let's just do that. And you don't like it, you go to another community to be like, okay, yeah, those guys were crazy. Let's go over here. And or you start your own. A lot of people, moved out west for exactly that reason in America. And then it sort of goes up a bit from there and goes up, and you sort of have these interconnected small autonomous groups. And that you finally get up to a state level. And those are supposed to be autonomous countries that then have this interconnection, sort of like an EU that worked. And, but they had these but it all started down at the individual level, at the community level. And that's something that you see now. It's very, very, important for them to break that apart. And that's exactly why they're focusing on breaking apart these small communities and the churches and religions and just breaking up those social structures and that social network, and even attacking the family and saying that, oh, that's not a good idea. Your parents aren't there for you. We're here for you. The teachers are here for you. The government's here for you. And they're just trying to break that up at the fundamental level, family level, community level. And because that's how you break apart a society. And so if you want to have a strong society, that's how you structure it, from the ground up. And they're trying to break that apart because they don't want that society. They want their own society. They want to have something else. They want control. And so that's a demonstration of that.
I mean, it's very, in the carnivore community as an example, it's very intuitive for us to know to question things and to kind of, as we say, build things from the ground up. I mean, the government dietary guidelines is the ultimate centralized approach to management, right? And it's like, okay, it's the guidelines are for sale. Who's got the most money? All right, well, the processed food and sugar lobby had the most money, so they got to dictate, what an entire country or countries ate, and look how sick we've all become. And so for us to say, I don't want this centralized approach to my food or my health. I want a more, independent, local, grassroots approach that works for me and my family. Well, and then all these things flow on it. All these other themes kind of end up being discussed in the carnivore community because it is about like sovereignty and independence.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much it's all connected and you can't unconnect it. Cause I think a lot of times people say like, stay in your own lane, and that it's all connected. Like what you eat and them trying to control what we eat to make us weaker. I genuinely believe that make us weaker and more dependent. And so then what does that mean? So they can control us more and put more regulations on these things and get more money and all these things. So you can't just say that we're eating meat because it's healthy. Like it's so much more than that. And it trickles in domino effects, like to every aspect of our lives that we don't even really think about a lot, from the biggest to the smallest issues. And that's nature too. Like if you think about it, like when we're trying to disconnect ourselves from nature, like we can't. Like everything in life is interconnected, and we're all interconnected, and something affects something else. And so yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm really proud to be like a part of the carnivore community, to where we are encouraging people to question things and look into things, and stand up for what they believe in and do what they know is right for them, and not just listen to someone else blindly. And it really is a really cool movement to be a part of. And then on top of that, you get to eat delicious food and feel great all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you living on base in Japan?
No, we lucked out, and we are in a little city, Yomitan-san. It's about a mile away from where my husband works, but you either are told that you have to live on base, or if they're at 90% capacity, you get to live off base. And so we lucked out with that, and we're in a Japanese neighborhood, and not really many of our neighbors speak very much English. We just kind of wave and say like konbanwa or ohayo gozaimasu and things like that, and just nod at each other. So yeah, it's been really cool though. I'm enjoying it.
I just Googled, you're in Okinawa, right? Is that
Yeah.
the area?
Oh, nice.
So it's on like a beautiful sea. I can see the water's
Mm.
really green. I've never been there. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, the coral reefs here are amazing, and it's really fun to go spearfishing. Even though I don't catch anything, it's still fun to just look and see all the fish.
Definitely snorkel.
Yeah, we saw a shark.
Catch.
What?
All the fish you can't catch.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you look good, but I can't get you. We saw a shark one time. That was really cool. Like swam right by us, and my husband had a fish on a spear, and he was trying to help me get one, and he was pointing at one time, and there's this huge eel coming out of a rock, and it was like, and it was going up towards him, and he didn't see it, and he was pointing down. He was like, go get that fish, and I was like, do you not see that big eel? Like, we're trying to like talk to each other underwater, and I was like, that big eel, and he finally saw it and was like, oh shoot. And I think it was trying to like get the fish that was on his spear, but that was pretty intense. So we swam away, and then there's a ton of sea snakes out here that
Wow.
yeah.
Absolutely not.
No, it's so cool. It's so fun. I don't know. Maybe I'm a psychopath and I just don't have a sense of danger or what's supposed to be gross and things like that. But I love it. I enjoy it.
Oh, that's cool.
Thank you.
So Jess, since going carnivore in, what was it? Sometime in 2020, was it that you first went carnivore?
Yeah.
What are you eating, and like what's working for you on carnivore?
I am eating things I want to eat. I think that's something people always try to like force themselves to eat certain meats because other people are, and I feel like just eat the meat that you're craving. And so I eat what I crave. So it usually goes in flows of like, maybe I'll eat more pork, maybe I'll eat more beef, maybe I'll eat some chicken. But the most consistent one obviously is beef, but every now and then I'll eat more chicken, like drumsticks, or I'll have some liver and things like that. So yeah, I'm eating meat, obviously, some dairy, and eggs, and that's it. And
is it quite high fat, or what's your approach there?
I tried the high fat thing because that's kind of like going around the carnivore community, and I just gained weight. It did not work for me, and I work out a lot, and I'm trying to put on muscle. So I was like, oh yeah, you got to eat big to get big. And so I was like eating high fat, and I just gained like 10 pounds of fat from eating high fat. So I stopped that. And now I just prioritize protein, and I don't add extra butter and extra fat on top of things. I just eat the meat, and I feel so much better. I know it's working for some people, but no, that route did not work for me. Which I think is interesting because the whole thing is like, you can't get fat. Fat doesn't make you fat. And it's like, I don't know. Cause like,
it shouldn't anyway. But the thing is that some people have hormonal issues that they just, they store fat differently. And I think that goes away though. I mean, like, like Kelly Hogan, like she definitely gained weight, but eventually it just clicked over. She just kept going like, hey, I trust the process. And like, after like 6 months of gaining weight and being very nervous about the situation, it ended up, someone clicked, and then she just started, shredding off fat, and there's a lot of people that are like that, but it's a very small percentage of people. There are some people that sort of have to be, they might, like in your case, or if they eat like certain things, they'll gain weight. And so they have to be a bit more careful with it. Most people don't, but it happens. It does happen. But I think that eventually it'll sort of normalize. I think the thing is, it's not about eating high fat or high protein or high this or high that. You just need to eat what's right for you. You have to eat what's right for your body, and you have to get enough. You do need a certain amount of fat, and you need to get enough fat. And you also need a certain amount of protein. So you need to get enough protein. That's the main thing. And so that balances out differently for different people.
Yeah. And I don't track anything either. I just eat when I'm hungry and I stop eating, but I'm definitely not eating low fat. Like the burgers we get are high fat. Eat like the dark meat chicken and things like that. I'm just not adding like extra butter and things like that to my food. But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, obviously I probably still have some healing to do. I wrecked my gut for most of my life. So which is I also think it's funny when people try carnivore for a week or something like that, and they're like, oh, it's not for me. It didn't work. And it's like, you think that you can reverse all of the stuff that you put your body through in a week? Like you need to, I've been doing this for 3 years and still like need to have healing. Like I still kind of get a little bit of breakouts, nothing like I used to when I had really bad acne, but like I obviously still am healing. And there's almost 30 years of my life I was just completely like wrecking my hormones and wrecking my gut, and had a horrible immune system. So it's going to take a little longer to heal, like I was not in good shape before this.
And like, that's a funny thing too, they do it for, people do it for a couple of times. Like, oh, I didn't lose, I had 200 pounds to lose. I didn't lose. I only lost 20 pounds in the last month. It's just not working. It's not working for me. Like, and then you go back to eating what you were doing before, and then you just gain all the weight back and then more, and then some. It is a bit funny, some people will get quite impatient. They want it now. I think it was perfect. One I always think about is, it was like a Simpsons thing where like Mo like wanted to turn his bar into a restaurant. And so we had this giant deep fryer, and he's just like, he's talking to Homer. He's like, oh yeah, this thing can flash fry a buffalo in 40 seconds. And Homer's like, oh, but I want it now, like that.
Yeah.
This is like, and that's how people think. They've been struggling their whole life. I just saw a lady in clinic the other day, and she's been waiting to get spinal surgery for 2 years. So because she needs to lose weight down under BMI under 30, because it's just, it's a lot harder to do surgery, and it's also much more dangerous and much higher infection risk. And so she's been doing this, and she's been slowly sort of losing weight. She's a couple, oh yeah, I've lost like 2 kilos in the last like 6 months. And, so she's doing really good and all this sort of stuff. And it's just like, that's what people are used to doing, is like getting like a few kilos a year, 4 kilos, 5 kilos a year, Like when I was going with like different diets and programs, they're like, yeah, if you lose like a pound or 2 pounds a month, that's a good clip. That's a good, healthy amount of weight to lose. And then you're just going to have to, you have 200 extra pounds. You're just going to have to doing this, for 100 months, that's just how it is. And then you get people on a carnivore and they're losing dramatic weight. And they're like, oh yeah, I've lost like 70 pounds, 80 pounds in the last 6 months. And, but it's I've still got all this stuff. It's really slowing down. Like, well, when is this going to happen? When is this going to finish? And it's like, think about it. Think about how much, the dramatic improvement that you've had. Like, you've never lost weight. Have you ever lost weight this fast? Like, no. Have you ever felt this good? No. Have you ever had energy like this before? No. It's like, well, so recognize that this is actually a really fast process, and wanting to go even faster, is, it's a bit funny because, this is faster than you've ever gone in your life. This is better results than you've ever had in your life. And so, just recognize that things are working and that things are going well. Just let it go, and just realize things take time,
Yeah. In the Dr. Chaffe and I run a carnivore challenge, and like people will do it for 1 month and they'll lose like say 10 pounds, maybe 15 pounds. And then like, their skin conditions will go, their gut will heal up, they'll have more energy. Their sleep will finally be fixed, all this sort of stuff. And then in the second month, they're like, I only lost 5 pounds. And we're like, how are you feeling? Oh, I feel great. I feel so good. Like, I'm glowing. And then,
but it's not working for me because I've only lost 5 pounds.
Yeah, it's just 5 pounds. Right. Okay. Yeah.
That kind of goes into what Simon and I were talking about too before you came in. We're so I don't want to say brainwashed, but conditioned. We're so conditioned to believe that if someone is skinny or looks fit, then that means health. And like, especially in Okinawa, people always ask me like, oh, you live in Okinawa, that's a blue zone, everyone's so healthy there. And it's like, they're very small people. They look fit, or they look trim. They don't look fit, but they look trim. They're not typically overweight. That doesn't mean they're healthy. And it's just an interesting thing that people just equate health to looking a certain way, and instead of like thinking about what's actually internally happening. And I think that that is something like a mindset shift that we need in society too, of health isn't the person on the cover of a magazine. Even like, no matter how good they look, like that has nothing to do with how healthy they are first. But the opposite, I think, is tricky too, of once you get obese, like there is a line of like, yeah, that's not healthy, and we can tell. We can visually tell that you're not healthy.
Yeah, well, I mean, usually just having that excess adiposity is just a sign that you're doing other things that aren't healthy either, you know. And so, it can be, it's smoke, it's not the fire, it's just there's a sign that other things are happening as well. And, and people being small and slender, that sometimes just has to do with not getting enough food as opposed to getting the right food. And, for most of human history, people were, didn't have enough to eat, as opposed to had way too much to eat and the wrong kinds of things to eat. And so, that's why when people were very big and even very overweight, that was a sign of prosperity. That was actually like, you were a gangster. Like, the fatter you were, that's why that guy in the 1890s just like, I'm just a boss, and, that was the thing, back like in the Middle Ages, because like no one had enough to eat. So if you had so much more to eat that you were fat, then that, that meant something. You weren't like you hadn't really made it until you had gout. It was just like, that was just the sign of prosperity. And now obviously we know better, but that's how it was, because everyone was skinny and starving. So skinny doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy and you're eating the right thing. It can be as simple as you're not eating enough. And certainly a lot of people in China over the last century, with all the forced famines, they were very skinny and very stunted and very unhealthy, because of that. And then you get that genetic population comes to Australia or America, they start having better access to better food, and wham, they like, 6'4" kids, where they're like 5'2", these little wizened little, people in their 30s, and they look like they're like, 70-year-old grandparents. And, because they just had such a rough life, and, but they're skinny. So I guess that's what matters.
Yeah. I'm so excited for the next generation of carnivore kids, and just to completely dominate. We are a force to be reckoned with, this community. And I feel like that it puts a really big target on people's backs too. But could you imagine, like, if this way of eating and this mindset kind of took off and went mainstream? That would be really scary for a lot of people, because we would be bigger, we would be stronger. We even like our teeth, like how our teeth fit in our jaws, like we wouldn't need orthodontists, we wouldn't need eye doctors, we wouldn't need all of these things that are just considered normal nowadays. And that'd be a really cool society to be a part of. I hope I get to see it.
Yeah. Well, when you're healthy like that, you're not reliant on so many things,
Yeah. And
your expenses go down a lot.
I think that will happen, and I hope it will. I don't want it to happen quite yet, because I don't have kids yet. And I actually do like the idea of having my kids have, like having this crazy advantage.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Like, all the carnivore kids now, I mean, they're just going to be superheroes. They're going to be going through school, high school. They're all going to be like 6'6". They're going to be smart as hell, like wicked athletes. They're just going to kill it. They're just going to kill it. And like, so you want your kids to have an advantage. And so, I don't have kids yet. So I'm like, all right. So maybe we'll slow down this whole movement for a bit until Dr. Chaffe can, pop out some progeny, and like, and then we'll sort of ramp it up again. And see how it goes.
Will be, and with the birth rates too, just like absolutely declining. The carnivores are going to be the only ones that are going to be able to reproduce. So we're going to be, our society's reproduction rates are going to be on our shoulders.
I hope so. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. We just have to take responsibility and be good parents and teach our kids to think for themselves and ask questions and not just listen to authority for no reason other than that they're on TV or they're the authority. So
See if we can get like a carnivore sort of instilled in like the Mormon and Catholic church, so they're just ripping out like 9 kids or something like that. You just have them all be like carnivore kids as well. That would sort of,
Are we planning a cult right now? Is this how cults are started?
No, I think so.
We're going cross cult. We got the Mormons and the Catholics. Right? So,
we don't discriminate.
we don't discriminate between cults. All cults are welcome.
I'm excited.
No.
All right, Jess. Well, thank you so much for joining Dr. Chaffe and I. That was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know you and know more about you as well, because now we can chat more on Instagram, etc. And maybe meet in person one day too.
Yeah. Go to Australia. I'm not very far away from Australia, and there's a ton of carnivores in Australia. So
yeah.
Have you guys had a meetup yet? A carnivore meetup in Australia?
I think so.
Yeah, we sort of hosted out. We hosted our own, didn't we? Went at Low Carb Down Under.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. Yeah, we had a lot of carnivore people. We all went out for dinner. Yeah, we should do that. I think that's something that I've wanted to sort of do more in Perth. I can't really organize these things myself, so I never have time. But there's a Facebook group like Aussie Carnivores or something like that, and I've seen people try to sort of set something up a couple times there, but I don't know if that was actually successful. But yeah, it's something. You're right. Just like building these communities, it's something that we should do. You should try to meet people in your area and sort of get to know people and be friendly. And I've started meeting more doctors and people here that are of that mind. And yeah, and so we'll like go to dinner or get steaks or have barbecues or something like that. And so that's fun. And then Jordan Peterson will be here next week, which would be cool. Another carnivore in the house. And
are you going?
Yeah, I'm going. So yeah, I'm doing a blog post for the Lion Diet website for Michaela Peterson, and so I was able to talk to them and just sort of mention I was in Perth and that tickets were sold out, and they were actually able to get me tickets, which was really, really cool of them. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I've been I was a Jordan Peterson fan before like anyone knew who he was.
Before it was cool, man.
Yeah, that's it. I was. And but when he first started talking out about Bill C-16 up in Canada, forcing you to use people as preferred pronouns. And he was just like, hey, this is a bad road to go down. And so he started making these arguments for that. And people started just ostracizing him. And he was able to just stand up and just, I mean, they really did not realize who they were getting in a squabble with. He just shut them down. I saw that. I was like, dude, this guy is bang on the money. And, and I saw these videos that they were like trying to say, oh, look how horrible and hateful this person is. I'm like, that guy's dead ass right. Good for him. And so I started following him, and it was interesting because at first I was really interested in him because he was talking about things and using the same vernacular that like Thomas Sowell would in a lot of ways. I was like, Jesus, this guy
about to mention that. Yeah.
And I found out actually, no, he hadn't read Thomas Sowell yet, but he'd come to these conclusions, the same conclusions that Sowell had, but like through a very different end route, through like, psychology and history. And I was just like, okay, this guy's quite insightful in a lot of ways that people just don't really, they're scratching the surface of
similar to Milton Friedman, I think. Have you
he's great. Yeah.
I think it's in a bit of those three, Sowell, Friedman and Peterson, pretty wise people.
Yeah.
Big time. Walter Williams as well. You should definitely check that guy out too. That was like Sowell's best friend for 50 years, something like that.
Down the rabbit hole, I guess.
He's a brilliant economist as well. Very similar background to Sowell. He's a black guy, grew up in like the projects of Philadelphia. Right, and okay. But he was like saying like the black community then was very different. It was like 95%, 90% marriage rates. He said his father had, walked off on them, but he said he was one of the only ones he knew. He was the only person he knew that didn't have a father. And so he was in that community, and he had other people's parents, other people's fathers that sort of taught him how to be, a man. Crazy upbringing this guy had. He was a basketball player. I know we're getting off on a tangent, but I think it's really interesting. He played basketball. He was a really good basketball player. And so he was just playing, sort of street hoops. His cousin was actually a guy named Dr. J, who's like a Julius Erving. He was like a famous basketball player. You look up his highlights; they're awesome. And so he was, he loved basketball, played basketball, and he was the best guy in his neighborhood. He was the best guy in, Philly. Like they'd be playing, and like he would always win. And then this guy who's like sort of the second best, but he would always win. He like went away for a summer, like went to like a camp or something like that, and came back, and he was just a little better than him. And he was just beating him, but like close. It wasn't like he was kicking his ass or something like that, but he was just like consistently beating him. And he got really, really bummed out by that, because his dream was to play in the NBA. And he was just like, well, Jesus, like if I'm only the second best guy in my neighborhood, then obviously I don't have what it takes, and it sort of crashed his dreams. Well, the guy who had just started beating him, who he had been better than the year before, was Wilt Chamberlain, one of the all-time greatest basketball players in history. The guy scored personally 100 points in one of his games himself. 100 points.
Yeah, he was a superstar. Chamberlain.
The guy was an absolute he's just the most dominant player of his era. And like, you'd have to sort of look at that. You say like maybe Jordan, or like, some of that would be, or like LeBron James. Those would be the only people that could compete for all-time best with Wilt Chamberlain. That guy was an absolute physical force, and he was just a little not quite as good as him. You know what I mean? Like, how depressing is that? Like that, like he must have been amazing, and but that was it. And then he said there was a guy in his neighborhood. He was kind of a joker. He's just a bit of a neighborhood clown. And his mom says, like, you don't get to hang out with that kid anymore. He's too silly. He's not going to amount to anything. He's just he's just too jokey, and he's not serious enough, right? You don't get to hang out with him. That was Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, Jesus.
A lot of talent coming out of that neighborhood.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Yeah. But that was the thing, you had parents, and you had people that were poor, and they were absolutely under the gun. They had real institutional racism and real things against them. And so that made them that at that community level, doubling back to what we were talking about, you're always stronger at the community level, at the family level. They had a strong family, very strong family structure. They had very strong community. And that actually was able to weather them and defend them and protect them so that they could grow up and be prosperous. Same with Sowell, and we don't have that anymore. That's breaking down across the board for everyone. And it's only hurting people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole like strong men make good times make weak men make bad times. Where do you think we are in that? Just real quick, but where do you think we are in that situation? Are we in the weak times, or are the bad times, or are we in the weak men making bad?
We're in the weak men making bad times. We're coming into bad times. Dang. Yeah, we had good times.
That'll take.
It was good times when we were kids.
Yeah, the 90s. That is one thing I do say about Okinawa and Japan, is that it feels like the 90s and the early 2000s here, or the 90s, because it feels like pre 9/11 here. Like when you could just run around your neighborhood, and your parents would just, like my dad would just whistle, and we'd like run back for dinner, and you could just go around town and do whatever you wanted and hang out, and life was great. It was just, the US was the greatest thing ever, and pride for your country was cool. And so it feels like that here, where like kids are just running around, everything's happy-go-lucky. You can leave your bike outside the grocery store and no one's going to take it. People are nice to you, and so it really feels like that here. So I do miss the United States because I'm American, but yeah, that's definitely a cool thing about Japan.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sounds nice.
I think Alaska would be about the same. That's what I've heard from people saying. It's just sort of like 1950s America, just, except really cold.
Crazy cold.
Yeah.
gorgeous though, absolutely gorgeous. Like the mountains there and everything, just stunning, stunning things. Yeah, probably most beautiful part of the world I've ever been in my life was Alaska. And but my God, is it cold? I keep playing with that. I mean, like it would be so cool. I would love to live in Alaska, but I just can't get my head around being cold for the rest of my life. You know, it's like, you know,
maybe for 2 months in summer or something.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hiking, hunting, outdoors.
No,
Yeah, just have a vacation house in Alaska.
Yeah.
You know, I could even do a winter there because if it gets cold enough, it's just like you're just bundling up anyway. You're going to be warm. You're going to be indoors where it's warm. You're not going to just sort of be in this halfway place if it's not quite cold enough to like do anything about it. And you're just a bit chilly all the time. You know, even like just weather, like a winter there with just like deep snow and just stunning vistas. Like, I think that would be pretty cool to be out in a cabin, you know, in the middle of Alaska, you know, for that. I think that would be amazing. But, yeah, maybe not forever, you know, it'd just be, I just can't be cold all the time. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
No way.
It's
Sorry, you go, Jess. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I'm sorry. We're just talking too much. Yeah, my parents have a cabin up in Big Bear in California, and
Awesome.
they love it, but they so they'll go up and just enjoy it. But then when it starts to snow, if it ever snows in California, because that is another thing that doesn't happen as much as it used to, but they'll come back down the mountain and go back because it's like a 30-degree difference. So they're the same where they'll like go up the mountain and enjoy it and then just like come back down when they've had too much of the cold.
Yeah. Yeah. California is one of the only places, probably the only place that you can ski and surf in the same day.
Yeah, and have different weather too.
Well, and enjoy both. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, I'm sure there are other places that, like, you know, have the sea there, but it's like blistering cold, you know. I mean, like you can surf in Ireland, but like you'll hate yourself for it, you know. And like I went surfing there once, and it's actually pretty good waves because you just got, you know, it's crashing off the Atlantic, but it's like glacier melt. You know, it's like just these icebergs, you know, like just melt. And it was insanely cold. It was just the coldest water I've ever been in my life. Just hands down. It was insane. It felt sub-zero, you know, like it maybe like the salt just like kept it from freezing all the way, you know, but it was so damn cold. It was just awful.
Yeah, I definitely lucked out growing up in Southern California. Didn't realize how different other states were. Like, because when you're a kid, you grow up in a certain area and you just assume everyone else has the same experience as you. You don't really like understand that some other kid in like Wyoming is like in like up to his eyeballs in snow. So, and then when I got married and we started moving around, I was like, oh man, we really lucked out with California weather. Like it's so different everywhere else.
Yeah, no, it is. Oh, cool.
All right, let's wrap.
Yeah,
Jess, thank you so much.
Yeah, and sorry, what are the socials and everything like that?
Yeah. How can we find you?
Yeah, so my Instagram is just my name, Jesselyn.Randle, and on YouTube, it's my name, Jesselyn Randle, and then I also have the Carnivore Revolution YouTube with Serena.
With Serena, who's awesome, who Dr. Chaffe and I know very well.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. It was a lot of fun talking. I think we sort of went off on a bit of a ramble there, but you know, anyway, I liked it anyway. So
it's nice.
But yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.